Thank everyone for coming, and I'd also like to thank our co-sponsors, the HBA, the Postdoc Association, and the GRO. So please help me welcome our speaker, Kathy Hansen from the International School of Protocol.
What I'm going to be talking about is how to get a job, how to keep a job, and how to advance in a job. And that's what the International School of Protocol does most of the time. We work with companies, we work with people who are getting ready to enter the job market, and we work with people who've been in the job, maybe moving from jobs, or we work with people who have lost jobs and are moving into other positions. 80-something% of jobs are not found on the internet, but rather are found from your networks, from people you know. And that's what we'll be talking about today, is how to work a room, how to network, and how to use those networks to advance and give yourself opportunities. I used to be a college professor. I was a college professor of communication for a number of years. I was a speech and debate coach. And I was asked, actually, to begin to teach soft skills, to begin to teach etiquette, protocol, social skills, communication skills, because those social skills, those communication skills are the keys to having increased job satisfaction. I don't know if you're watching the research that keeps coming out again and again and again. It's not how smart you are, but it's rather those interpersonal relationships that make a big difference as far as, again, those same things. Getting the job, keeping the job, advancing in a job, and they're also linked to increased job satisfaction, increased salaries as well. So we're going to be focusing today very much on working that room and using your network, mingling, using the network. I want you to look around the room. We're going to move. We're going to do things. This isn't going to be me just talking and you listening. And I want you to look around the room right now. Just look around the room, look at people, and I want you to identify people that you know not at all, or that you know the least. Everybody's doing that? Okay, so find the people that you know the least. Have you identified people that you know the least?
Yes.
All right. What you're going to do, is that a lot of people? What, is there anyone who knows everyone very well? Okay. So the people that you know the least. Is there anyone who knows 0 people? Okay, all right. Oh, good. You're going to get lots of opportunities. What you're going to do is find a person that you don't know and stand up and do whatever it is that you feel is appropriate. And don't do anything else. Just stay with that person. Go ahead. So when you have a networking event, a mingling event, you do just that. So now that's all you do. You find somebody that you don't know. You go up to the person. I'll ask you what you did in a moment. We'll make sure you're okay. And then you find a few more people, and you keep doing that for about 2 hours. Okay, for about 2 hours. And at that point, you'll probably cover about 10 new groups of people. About 10 people. So we'll talk about what you did. We'll talk about events that you have that are coming up. The importance of that networking, which I had mentioned before. And then we'll look at all the things that are important to consider as you're preparing for a particular mingling or networking event. But let's review what you just did. So you found someone you didn't know, and you did what? What did you do? Hello, introduced yourself, asked their name, right? Is that what everybody did? Put out your hand, shook hands. And then what did you do? The room was filled with people talking. What did you talk about? What they're doing. Interests, where they're from, how long have they been here, profile, exactly. These are stages in the initial acquaintance process. The first thing you do appropriately is you introduce yourself. You say your name, you shake hands. And then you do what's called a biographical exchange, where you're just asking them, what brought you here? How are you connected to this event? Where are you from? What year? What are you studying? What are your areas of interest? And then you might isolate similarities, some things that you had in common. Is that pretty much what you were doing? Okay, that's the appropriate thing. And that's probably as much as you would do. Perhaps the next stage you could get to would be social topics, other people. So nothing that's that significant. What you don't want to do are what happens later as you're developing relationships. And later in relationships, you talk about attitudes and beliefs, which you wouldn't do when you first meet someone. So I expect that no one said, who are you voting for? that would not be the thing to say. Unless you're with people that are your friends. So, but then you don't need to ask. And then you also wouldn't say the terrible things that had just happened to you when you're first meeting somebody. Those are inappropriate things, but I think we've all had them happen, haven't we? Where we've met somebody for the first time, and it was supposed to be small talk, it was supposed to be really superficial things, and then they told us way too much information. Not a good way to get a job, or have relationships, or meet new people. So again, we're introducing ourselves, social topics. I want to review a few things to consider as well, sort of some background as well. One of the things to talk about is the handshake. The handshake does vary from culture to culture. I'm going to talk about the handshake as it is done in the United States. You use your right hand, everybody knows that. I think I was looking at your handshake a little bit, although I do a lot of handshaking and teaching of handshakes, so I know that people might do things a little bit differently. And so when you shake hands, again, it's that right hand. You want to make sure that between your index finger and your thumb, where you have that webbing, that the web of your hand touches the web of the other person's hand. It is a firm handshake. It is something you squeeze. It don't hurt somebody, but you squeeze pretty substantially. It is a firm handshake. And we're going to see those firm handshakes. Our Austrian handshakes, our German handshakes, our Russian handshakes are going to be among the firmest handshakes. Our Indonesian handshakes are not going to be so. They're going to be long, length, and lingering handshakes. But what in the United States we're going to see, and in a good part of Western culture, is we're going to see this very firm handshake. The other thing that you do when you're, in addition to shaking hands, is what? Where are your eyes? You have direct eye contact most of the time. And then the other thing you want to do is speak very clearly. State your name clearly. State your first and your last name very articulately, very, very clearly. Who in here has a difficult to pronounce name, first or last name? And so what have you done about that?
I just needed it to be easier to pronounce. Instead of saying woman, I say
Okay, great. So find a way then to make it so that your name is going to be understandable. And sometimes people don't always hear the accent too. They don't hear it unless they're from a particular culture. They're not going to hear the different sounds. So realize people might, and I think you know that, people might not get it exactly. And as long as they're getting it close enough, that's what you're aiming for as well. What you don't want to do when introducing yourself is to give yourself an honorific. What's an honorific?
Professor.
Professor, doctor, Mr., Ms., senator, president. Don't give it to yourself. When you're introducing to people who have not yet made another's acquaintance, then you may be giving the honorific. That would be appropriate in that case. But you don't introduce yourself as, hello, I'm Dr. Hansen. You wouldn't say that. You would say your first name and your last name. And I do want to talk about introductions, the proper formula for an introduction as you're at your various networking and mingling events. But first I want to ask what you hope to learn about mingling, networking, as you're preparing again for this whole interview series too, And I want to ask what mingling difficulties, in other words, working a room, going up to people, up to a room full of strangers possibly, and meeting people, what mingling difficulties you hope to overcome in the next hour and a half. So, first tell me what kind of mingling networking opportunities you have coming up, or that you see, and it could be social too. Tell me what do you have?
University alumni.
Really important group too. Really very, very useful group for getting jobs. Other events.
BioBuzz.
All of these are going to be important groups too. This is how somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who gets you that position, gets you the job, gets you in the door, gets you doing something, gets you the internship, whatever it may be. Other events. Could be a social event.
Academic conferences?
Academic conferences. That's what I was really having in mind too. Academic conferences. You go places, right? But it's not always like this, right? Where do you go when you are not studying, not going to academic conferences, and not
A training event?
a training event? How about for fun?
The
Arthur.
A party, okay. Where party? You may be the only one.
I hope I'm not the only one.
Where else do you go? What you have social things you do? Where else might you go? A wedding. Yes, okay. Somebody's wedding. At somebody's wedding. So picture again all of these kinds of events that you do. What do you want to overcome? What mingling difficulty do you want to overcome? And I'll make sure I talk about it. I'll be talking about it. I think I'll probably cover it, but what do you have in mind? Or does everyone love it? Who in here just loves going into a room full of strangers and working the room? Hello? Wow. Okay, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. It's usually a really small, it's less than 10%. So,
but, sometimes you go and there's this group of people and they're talking about something that basically all of them know about it, and you stand there and I don't get anything from this.
right,
And you don't have any comments to
right,
to
okay.
It's-
So
it's
the
very
difficult to enter group.
Yeah, sometimes it's
I mean, maybe related to that, if I could just interject. What I was kind of hoping to hear about too is once you've actually got the interview, oftentimes, and this is something that's pertinent probably to some of us that are at that stage, you go out for dinner with like the hiring committee and things like that. That's sort of a difficult to enter group because you're an outsider. They already know each other very well, and what topics are, you know, sort of off limits.
So you know what this looks like. They take you out to dinner, and it's not just you necessarily. It's other candidates as well. So there you are.
Well, or the whole
Right.
committee and you.
All of it.
And yeah, you don't get to steer that conversation.
Right.
Lots of times
Right.
you're trying
Right.
to, you know,
So,
chime in but not say anything.
The dinner or lunch interview
Yeah.
conversation, which can be their whole committee and you, and it can be other candidates, which is lovely as well. That's always fun. The other candidates and you and the committee. I know there were other hands up here.
How like not being too friendly with somebody, so like kind of the move on step I find difficult with, because you kind of want to, you might hit off something, you want to keep talking, but you know you're not necessarily at a networking environment to do that, you're really there to move on, so.
That's right, that's right. So how to get out. There are lots of ways.
How do you talk to the maximum number of people? Because sometimes it's like there's a lot of people and you're trying to get to talk to as many people as you possibly can, but there's no time. So
Or do you just have to talk to right people, not to the maximum number of people?
You know what it's making me think about? I do a lot of work with politicians, and it's the people who are working for the politicians who are in a room and they're looking over the shoulder, waiting for the just that person to come. Not a good idea either.
What if you're a non-traditional student?
Then you get a lot of credit non-traditional students. If you're a non-traditional student. A non-traditional student might be a student who's entering school at 50 or 40.
Or 5.
Five.
That's a strategy.
Right, oh yes. Or who's entering school at 10.
Or how to reconnect with networks or after a personal setback.
Right.
Let's say you lost a job or
Right.
kind of reinventing yourself, but you have some negative things.
Right.
Other setbacks.
Yes. I'm working with prisoners right now. People who are just out of prison.
As a career changer, when even though I feel I know how to work a room very well, that was in my old setting, my old environment. Moving to a different environment where I don't have the so-called gifted glare about the industry. That I think my challenge.
You're probably okay with it. Probably. It's still going to be the same things that apply. So, but I will address it.
Okay.
Other issues too, and there are lots of things I'm
But it's going to be afterwards. You want to do all this effort to mingle with the people to get to know them. What do you do after that?
That's the key, isn't it? That's the big piece of it, is the afterwards.
All of the different disciplines.
Yes, it is. So interdisciplinary networking. And again, some of it's going to apply in all situations. So again, sort of background information. We talked about the handshake. We talked about which hand you use. Like I said, I'll be talking as well about how to properly introduce to people, which we're going to be doing. And then we'll answer the questions as well as giving you other tips that I had prepared beforehand, some of which are in here. So again, we shake hands. We make sure it's a firm handshake. We know the position of the hand. We also don't give ourselves an honorific, as I had mentioned. And there are things with regard to the handshake that you want to make sure that you do. One is to keep your right hand available and free. So you have an event. Sometimes there's food in an event. Sometimes you're walking into an interview and you've got something in your hand. Right, I know this is basic, but you know what? Sometimes you don't think about it. My right hand is free all the time. I put all kinds of things under my left arm so that I'm ready to shake hands with my right hand. It is just completely available so that I'm not juggling things around. If I have food, I have my right hand available. I'm holding food, I'm holding a drink in my left hand. And I don't have jewelry there's nothing on my right hand. I don't have any jewelry, I don't have any bracelets, I don't have a ring on there. I'm working a networking event and I have a ring, my hand's going to be sore where that ring is. And if I put jewelry on it, you might end up shaking my watch or my bracelet. The other thing you want to do is not have hand lotion on either, or wear any cologne or perfume. A lot of people have fragrance sensitivities. I'm one of them. So you don't want to have an event where people then can smell you afterwards too. If you're lingering that way. I've had some lovely people that I've met that I ended up smelling like that person's cologne. So again, things like that, you think you want to consider that. The other thing that you want to consider too with regard to the handshake is there are only two of us in the room doing it. It's customary when you shake hands. What is that? So when you shake hands, you must always eye contact, and just two of us doing it.
Smile.
Standing.
Standing. So when I shake your hand, you stand up. So I say, hello, I'm Kathy Hansen. And it's Margia. It's very nice to meet you, Margia. And you might say, nice to meet you too. What would you say to me? How would you refer to me? What am I? Old. Okay? So, after I turned 50, it was like all of a sudden I got that. Oh, great. So you'd use an honorific. And if you don't know, so when in doubt, when a person is not your peer and is someone who also might be giving you a job, it is appropriate to be deferential and to use the person's honorific and last name, and I would say, please call me. But they'll let you know. And then from there, you're okay. But we still want to be deferential. My friend Carol, who is an astronomer for Hubble Space Telescope, when she introduces herself, and she's 61, and when she introduces herself, she says, hello, I'm Carol. But she's 61. We want to be, she's done a whole lot. She's somebody important. And so, but we don't know her last name. But we want to sort of show that we're deferential. So what do you do? What would you do in a case like that? And she's Dr. Christian, but we don't know that. Because she's just, ma'am, she might smack you. I know her well. When in doubt, what should you always do when in doubt? Just ask, how would you like me to refer to you? Just like that. So if you don't know, just say how. So she says, hi, I'm Carol. And you assume, she probably wants to be called Carol. But again, just in case, and just show that we respect her at 61. That we're going to, again, show that deference. How would you like, oh, very nice to meet you. How would you like me to refer to you? Simple. We also, at any event, we have total control of the image that we want to create. This certainly is going to apply to job interviews, to various events where we're going to be networking with prospective employers and people who are connected to our employers. And so what I'm talking about is dress. So what is it that dress still communicates a whole lot. So what is it that we want to wear? How do we want to dress?
The way everybody else is dressed.
That's tricky. That's a really good point. Because I know someone who didn't get a job doing that. I know someone else who did. And that was just why it's tricky. So I know somebody on her third interview. So first interview, she had the suit on. She said, this place, this Epic, whatever it is that they do, software company, it's really business, not even business sloppy. And so second interview, she dressed like the rest of the people. And I know this from talking to the person who didn't hire her. And he said, I expected her to dress even more professionally for the second interview. Why? Moving up. That's right. So she thought, they're going to evaluate me. Babe is, I think she's on. They're going to evaluate me and see how I would fit in, and I want to look like I fit in. And in fact, here it was, this very casual tech company that still was expecting, the higher up was expecting that business professional. So again, consider what is the image you want to create. The other thing you want to do, as you have an event, a networking event, what do you want to have with you? Make sure you have
Cards.
You have your business card is what you're going to have. People still have business. I'm not sure why, but people still do have business cards. And they still do pass them out. And you want to make sure that they are immaculate too. So not one that's frayed, that has writing on it, that looks like it's been through the laundry. So make sure your business cards are very, very clean. And that's sort of going again along with this image that you want to create.
Yeah, question about business cards. Are you supposed to hand them with both hands?
You don't have to use both. Okay. I know some places you do, but
some people make it a point to hand it when it's really awkward.
We are here. There are some places where it would be appropriate to do this. All right. So this is the two-handed. In some places you wouldn't, because you wouldn't be handing it with your left hand. But for the most part, in China you tend to do both. Much of Asia, you're going to do both hands. In the United States doesn't have to be. But what you still want to do, and this is probably what you learned as well, is that you want to pass it. So here's the top of my business card, here's the bottom. So I am passing it to you, and she's taking it with both hands. You don't have to take it with both hands, but it's not wrong to take it. If you do take it, right, but not like that, right? And so what's also appropriate to do, it's appropriate, and I think you probably want to do it. Look, she's looking at it now as well, and I think she's going to probably say something, aren't you? Yeah, she's going to say something, or she might even read it and say something. So you,
the best way to contact you.
all right, is this the best way to contact you? Or I see your offices are in Hunt Valley, Maryland. Where's that? Something, whatever it is. So again, that it's not just, I'm passing it out. We don't pass them out at a meal. If it's a business, you may keep it. If it is a business meal, and if everyone's doing it, including the higher-ups, then you would in that case. Some people like to have them in cases, to put your business card in a case. Sometimes that's hard to do at an event where you've got food. So what I suggest you have is pockets. So have your business cards in a pocket, nice clean. Don't keep them in that same place all the time. They will end up getting plenty.
If you work for an institution that does not provide business cards for you, should you go ahead and
Yes.
create your own that just has a your, what
Yes.
else should it have?
Yes. So if you work for an institution that doesn't have a business card, hasn't provided one, you can just have a personal business card. So you can just have a business card, and you can give yourself whatever title, whatever it is, postdoctoral student, and whatever you want to do. In some places in the world, you put everything on it. You put every single title, every single degree. That's not necessary in the United States. In some places, I do some work, Dubai. That would be a place where I need to put everything on that particular business card. Sometimes it will be in Chinese, let's say, on one side, and in English on the other side. In that case, we wouldn't write on it. You wouldn't, in the United States, it's okay to write on a business card. It is not considered offensive. But what you would say, either way, just to be safe, is you would say, do you mind if I take a note and write? If you are experienced in a number of Asian cultures, you're not going to want to write on a business card. You would step aside and do it privately. And when I'm saying writing on a business card, what am I talking about? Why am I saying write on a business card? What is it that you would, not yours, although I'll talk about personalizing yours, but why would you want to write something on someone's business card?
Some point about the need to discuss.
That's right.
You remember.
So you can remember the person. Have you ever been to an event where you came back with 30 business cards and you look, and maybe you remember some of them, and then you wonder, or maybe they go in your drawer for a while, or wherever they go, and then you get back and you think, I have no idea who this person was. So as soon as you can, writing that down so that you can remember. So having those business cards, considering that image that you want to create, what is it that you want to look like? I mean, you certainly want to look responsible, and you want to look professional, and you want to look smart, and you want to look like you can do the job. How does that translate then with regard to your dress, to your grooming? And so you want to consider those things, really important to consider those things. So again, we've got an event. I want you to think about any event that you might have in mind. You have one in mind? Yeah, you can put one in your head. It could be Thanksgiving. Okay? So it's going to be some event. You want to come armed with topics, not just the topic of your thesis and everything that you know about that, but you want to also be able to be a generalist, not in your field, but a generalist about social topics. So what can you talk about? And you're going to think about it beforehand. What can I talk about? What can you talk about?
believe it or not, I always Google hot topics of the day for conversation.
Great,
Get a list of 5, I read it real quick, shoot out the door,
great,
and
great.
I mean,
As long as it's not politics, religion, or health. Okay, so no politics, no religion, no health. I do work at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. They get to talk about health. Not at social events, but certainly when they're doing their professional networking. They're always talking about health. What other things? So we can Google hot topics. How else can you be a generalist? What can you talk about?
Weather.
I'm afraid it's political. But, you know, that's something I've been talking about all week, have you? I've been talking about it all week, and it seems that it's led to other things as well. You know, where I've talked about somebody who I know in New Jersey or at Tisch Hospital in New York, or you know, something like that, where I've managed to talk about the weather without talking about global warming, which for some reason is political, and I'm not really quite sure why, but it is.
The celebrities always come up when I go to events.
It could be. I'm not real good at celebrities, but could be. Or, you know, or even like current movies or shows. I bet I'm not alone in here. Who else in here does not have a television? Who doesn't have television? And so, but I do know, I do look up to see who. Oh, there's somebody somebody asked me, and I thought, I've got to figure out who she is. It's somebody. She's a little person. She was from Toddlers and Tiaras, mind you. What is it? What's her name?
Boo Boo Child.
Honey Boo Boo. I now know who she is. It's not worth looking at, but it is something that people are, you know, hearing about that too. So it's a little child, and it's a reality show. It's really not appropriate. It's not good behavior of everything that's happening there. What are other topics? Sports, which I don't do well. I've not been to wherever the stadiums are in this town, but maybe. I mean, that might be something. I mean, certainly I know that the Orioles were in the playoffs. I know that. That's about the extent of what I know about it. But for some people, that is something to talk about. What else? Travel, sort of where you're from, why are you here, and sometimes the event is at somewhere interesting, too. I was talking about mingling. It was a group of people, it was a diverse group of people, and one of the people who, they're from all professions, and one of the people was going to go as the friend or date of somebody to this event, a press event. And it was at the Maryland Club here in Baltimore. She wasn't from here, and she said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to look up the Maryland Club. And so she then had that to talk about. So you could certainly then be able to talk about the place, the event, the city. And again, it's so easy to find it. Review guest lists, too. If there's an event, there are people there, take a look at the names of the people who are there. Why? It's just going to arm you with that, so that when you're meeting that person, it's going to be easier to remember the name of the person. And then, oh yes, so you can even look up bios of people as well. Be able to ask them about the research that they're doing. The other thing about an event with food that so few people remember to do is before you get to an event with food, what should you do? It seems counterintuitive, I know. Eat before the event. Eat before the event. You don't want to go to the event hungry. You're looking at me like I'm crazy. Whoa, the food's so good, but what's the problem? And that's the same with the interview lunch, the interview dinner. Do not go hungry to the interview lunch or dinner. A good interviewer is going to give you an opportunity to eat, but you might not have a good interviewer, and you might be, you know, your stomach growling as you're having that experience, which isn't a great one, to be interviewed over a meal. I think it's one of the hardest things, too.
So what kind of food do you usually take?
An interview. If you have a good person who's interviewing you, that person's going to guide you. and you're going to make suggestions. I suggest this, and that person, so when you're in that position, you'll do this. When you are the person interviewing, you'll suggest, and then you'll eat the same thing that the person that you are interviewing. That's a good interviewer, some interviewers aren't. So you're going to, if the person doesn't do that, doesn't make suggestions for you, then just order very easy to eat food. So nothing that's going to get stuck in your teeth, nothing that you're going to have to twirl like spaghetti, nothing that's going to splash on you, and that's moderately priced. So you don't want to order the most expensive thing.
Salad is good.
Maybe, maybe not. Spinach salad, what's the problem with spinach salad? It always gets stuck in the teeth, like 98% of the time. So if it's, you know, or sometimes salads are just hard to eat. If it's a chopped salad, meaning it's all chopped up beforehand, that tends to be a little bit easier to eat. But if it's one where you're going to have to cut it, a tomato might go squirted, you might have to play around with the onions a little bit, it could be hard to eat. And I'm hoping to have the opportunity to talk about actual, using utensils, dining, how to have a whole dinner or lunch. All right. So we've got the event. We've thought about business cards. We've thought about what we're going to wear. We've thought about where it is. We're making sure we're getting there. Get there. It's good to get there early. Consider again, you're going to spend about 2 hours there. If that's appropriate too. And we also want to remember there are name badges like at this event as well. Let's talk about the name badge. Tell me everything you know about the name badge. Sometimes I'll have them printed for you beforehand, and then that takes care of part of it. What else about you? Yeah, that's right. She just moved hers. Because it should show clearly. You don't want to cover it up. The purpose is for it to be observed. The minority of you in here are wearing it in the correct spot.
To the right side?
On the right side. It's on the right side. The reason it's on the right side is because, what?
Because when you shake hands, it's not where your eye goes?
It's exactly, that's what it is. It follows the line of sight. It's
I
as
heard
simple
that.
as that. That's what it is. So it follows the line of sight, so you put it on the right side. And then if you have the opportunity to write your name really clearly. As large as you can, that's reasonable too. Again, so that people can see it. Don't put it under your jacket, don't put it under your hair. And neat handwriting as well. So you're probably going to check. All right. So you have the event in mind, and now you're in the mingling situation, and you've just met somebody, perhaps someone quite important that you were hoping to meet. You're pretty excited about it. Someone whose research you've been following. Maybe you even corresponded with this person a little bit, and now you get to meet her or him.
So sometimes, mostly in the meetings, they used to do the tags, which will be in the middle.
That's right. Then there's nothing you can do about it. Just try not to have it so low so that if you can tie it up a little bit higher, that's going to be easier to look at. If you can get it. But yes, sometimes you'll have it on.
I saw someone have like a clip, so they can clip it even once.
And so I can put a clip here too. So I like to have, I wear a suit all the time because I'm the International School of Protocol. I'm a rock climber, so I don't wear a suit all the time. So I'm always having a lapel that I can put it on as well. And just because you have a pocket doesn't mean it goes on your left side. That's not what that's for. All right, so you're mingling, and then you this great person that you were hoping to meet, and you've met, and then you have a colleague or someone who's on your level, and you want to properly introduce the two of them to each other. Who knows the formula for introductions? There is a correct way to introduce two people who have not yet made one another's acquaintance. It's a little different socially and professionally, and it varies from culture to culture. Although part of it does not vary.
Supposed to ask, like, the person of higher stature, may I introduce you to the person of lower stature? Something like that.
Something, but you got the right idea.
Yeah.
Right.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so everywhere in the world, there is rank everywhere. Rank, though, is attributed differently depending on where you are and in the setting. And so sometimes rank's pretty easy. So if it's a professor and a student, that rank is easy. We know who has the higher rank. If it's the president and a senator, we know who has the higher rank. If it's the chief executive, and that's everywhere we get that. If it's the chief executive officer and a worker, in many cultures, the chief executive officer outranks the worker. In some places, if the worker is old, that worker could outrank the chief executive officer for the purpose of the introduction. In North America, in much of Western culture, this is what the hierarchy will be for an introduction. In a business setting, it's going to be just based on rank. On rank. So the most important person in the company is going to outrank everybody else. In a social setting, in much of Western culture, who is the most highly ranked person? It's by gender and age. And who, what do you think? It's female, okay? So in Western culture, our most highly ranked person is going to be our oldest woman in a social situation, in a social setting. The only people who are going to outrank her would be a high-ranking member of, let's say, the clergy or a member of a royal family would outrank. But in other words, the great-grandmother is going to, in the social setting, grandmother. And I know that it's not true everywhere. Sometimes in other places, it might be the grandfather who's going to have the higher rank. So, as you were saying, is it Dave?
Oh, yes.
Okay. As you were saying, then there gets to be a protocol that does not vary. And so it varies who the person who we attribute the greater respect to or more deferential to. That's where the difference is based on culture. But what is not different is that we say the name of the most important person, most highly ranked person first, and we're always introducing the less important person, the less highly ranked person, to the more highly ranked person. So let me tell you how it sounds. If you're using the words introduce and to and you, this is how they are stated. Higher authority, I'll just say higher authority. Higher authority, I would like to introduce to you lower authority. Lower authority, I would like to introduce you to higher authority. I never introduced, I'll say it again, in my words, I never introduced higher to the lower. I'm always presenting to the person I need to be more deferential to. I don't need to introduce that person, the more important person. I don't need to, if you're so important, you don't need to think about that. You certainly don't, you never would say, for example, the President of the United States, you never give his biography. You never say, here are all the things that you just say, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. And so, in that same kind of reflection of attitude, we are always presenting. Happy birthday to you, may I present to you. So, more important person I would like to introduce to you. More important person I would like to introduce to you. Less important person. And less important person I would like to introduce you to. And then you give a little bit of background, too, after you say each person's name. So, more important person I would like to introduce to you my friend who is a student at Johns Hopkins, Biotech, whatever it might be. And friend, first and last name friend, I would like to introduce you to Professor so-and-so who I've met, who, and if everyone knows who that person is, you don't need to say any more than that, just the name. If the person's not as well known, let's say, then a little tag for the person. Do you have that? You understand that?
So the biographies come in at the very end after you...
It comes each way.
Each way.
So to make it, let's say it's two friends. So they're gonna have equal rights.
Okay, so like not if the one person out or vastly outranks the other person, so
Right.
they should know the hierarchy.
And we met, if the person vastly, you wouldn't even have to give a bio about that person, like that brief line. And the reason that you're doing that, to give a little bit of information, is it then allows you to leave that conversation and perhaps even to give them something to talk about. So here's somebody who's also interested in this research area. And so I could say, who were my neighbors, and they hadn't met before, I would say, Joe, I'd like you to meet my friend Deb Quinton, and who lives 3 houses down. And Deb, I'd like you to meet my next door neighbor, Joe. That's a little bit of information about them. Just that, or this person likes gardening, this person's just red, or also from Baltimore, also from wherever it might be. Got it? Now you're going to do it. Question.
Would you please repeat the introduction for the different rank?
Yes. Most important person I would like to introduce to you. Less important person. As part of the introduction, you then say, less important person, I would like to introduce you to more important person. And you really don't want to mess this up. It can be insulting, particularly when we're dealing with issues of protocol. I needed to work with the, he was called the president of the National Aquarium in Baltimore. And he became president of the National Aquarium. And it was like, it's a beautiful, he's a biologist, something like that. And then all of a sudden, all these people were bringing their prime ministers and their, all of a sudden he realized that he needed to worry about issues of rank and propriety. So again, he said, I think I'm going to insult people. I think I have insulted people, which is then, and then after I worked with him, he said, I know I've insulted people.
During the introduction, is it important who gives the hand first? Is it a protocol?
There is a protocol, and some people don't know it. But in general, protocol is that a person of higher authority is going to extend her hand or his hand first. Which is why, because Western culture is deferential to women, and the reason why is because there weren't a lot of them. It was just a question of scarcity. And so we need to be deferential because we want to keep them. We want to keep them. They're not a lot. And so that's why it used to be that a woman extended her hand before a man would shake her hand. And that's generally not the case now, but that gets to those issues then of protocol. It used to be women didn't stand when shaking hands. Just in general, women came to handshaking later. Who knows why we shake hands? People who shape the custom of shaking hands. What that comes from? Anyone know? It's violent.
Oh yes, it's like your right-handed, so you do like your sword hand.
That's
so
right.
if you shake with sword hand and you want to slice it.
That's exactly right. So the right hand was the weapon hand. It's as simple as that. The right hand was everyone had to be right-handed, as is the case in some parts still in the world where people have to be right-handed. And so everyone had to be right-handed. The weapon hand was the right hand. And so the handshake was to say, I'm not going to kill you, essentially. The up and down, the shaking part, was to show that there wasn't another weapon up the sleeve. That's where it comes from. And of course now there's just a study. It wasn't a big study, but it talked about some good things it did for the brain too, handshaking. I'll pay some attention to that.
How important is the semantics of the introduction? Like when you're talking about being deferential, would it be gauche if I said something like, president of the university, this is Ying Ying, my friend and the chair of so-and-so committee. Like the semantics of introduce to you or introduce you to, like is that sort of like a coded message that I've got my Emily Post stamp?
No, it's not Emily Post. Emily Post ultimately told people how to do it,
Okay.
but it's more coming from official ceremonial protocol. So protocol that's used in official ceremonies. For example, when we're dealing with embassies and we're looking at international things, or we're looking in military rank, or we're looking at rank within religious organizations. So and historically when we're looking at rank within a university as well. So those things are, and then Emily Post just wrote about it, that's all. So she made some money doing so. And there's a whole lot of service etiquette as well. Letitia Baldridge rewrote Emily Post and just passed away recently. And so, you know, when she worked in the embassies of Paris and Rome, and then she also worked in the White House, you know, these protocols were important too. So that's where it's coming from. It's coming from age-old protocol, actually, when rank was, and I guess it still is. So some people are really going to care about that. And some, but don't get it wrong, that was the most important thing. We tend to be more informal, although some of you, I imagine, who comes from a more formal, who feels like the United States is really informal, who thinks the United States is way more informal than your family that you know. So a lot of people like, yes. And so, again, you're going to find as you travel abroad as well, that there's going to be more issues of deference. So just to make sure you have it. You have it to you, and again, sometimes you're going to want to do it too. And just so you know it, I want you to just break into three. One person be the introducer, one person be the more important, one person be the less important person. And as you're referring to people, remember to use their honorifics when appropriate. Okay? So stand up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Just in groups of 3, and then just stay there. One person introduced, one person. Things that this group here has mentioned is to think of it as again a present, a gift. That I'm giving the gift to this higher authority. I would like to present to you. May I present to you? Not you two, but I'm giving. You know, we always have offerings to people. And the reason why is because they've earned that rank. And then again, remember using the honorific, refer to a person with his or her title. So we're at the event, and now we want to consider how to have conversation. We talked about topics, but now, and I think everyone in here is actually good. I hear you, I see you, and so I think you're good at this. And so you know, of course, having eye contact, you know to look at the person as if you're very interested in the person. You don't want to be, as I mentioned before with the politicians, that people who work for politicians, where they're looking to find that key person over the shoulder. Not a good idea. So we're really attentive. We're really looking at the person most of the time. And then we're asking questions, and we're going back and forth. In a social event, in Western culture, in North America specifically, most of Western culture, there's a question you do not ask. What is that?
How old are you?
That one's one.
That's only the window.
There's another one that a lot of people ask.
You don't ask marital status?
You don't ask that.
Or do you have a job?
It's kind of like that one. You don't ask in a social setting, and this doesn't apply in a conference, but you don't ask, what do you do?
I remember you would say, how do you do? And that was how you would ask. It wasn't how are you, it was
right. How do you do is like, it's kind of become how are you, and both of them are really rhetorical. It's not a literal question. So how do you do? And people tip their hats, how do you do? And it was like hello. And now it's become how are you doing, or how are you? And the answer is fine, thank you, how are you? Or how are you? It's not actually how are you. It's not, you don't, when someone says how are you, you don't really say how you are. I saw someone do it, where someone said, oh, I haven't seen you, how are you doing? And the person said, oh, I'm really tired. Oh, it's been just exhausting. And the person said, oh, that's great, me too. So back to the why don't you ask in a social setting, why don't you ask, what do you do? What's wrong with doing that? What is it like asking? It is. It's like asking how much money. It says what your socioeconomic status is. So you don't. Now that doesn't mean people don't like to talk about what they do. You just can't ask them directly. You might say, so you know, what do you like doing? And the person says, oh, I really like my job, or I'm really involved in this project at work,
what kind of work, you know, that, so then you can get to it that way if the person gives you that opportunity. But I know people who've really been offended by that, by that question, because maybe they didn't want to say the kind of work that they do. You know, they felt like that was a way that people were kind of, you know, outranking, and that can also be something you might see in Baltimore a bit. People sometimes do it with regard to where did you go to school too, where they're evaluating you that way. And sort of your safe, modest answer is to say, again, if you're in a social gathering, is to say, I went to school in Baltimore. And then if the person wants to pursue it, so you're not saying, you know, because you don't want to do what in a conversation? Show off. You don't want to brag. You don't want to boast. You don't want to try to outrank somebody. And so, if you were have you ever had this happen? I'm sure you have, where you're having a conversation with somebody and you say, I've been to Australia. And the person says, oh, I've been to Australia. You say, oh, what part? And then you find out the person owns Australia. And, you know, and like everything you say, the person owns, you know, and the person owns New Zealand, the person owns Tahiti. And so, you know, and then here you are, you're just trying to say you had a nice little trip to Australia. You're just trying to make some conversation. So again, we want to always be modest, too. We don't want to try to outrank someone. So we want to be asking questions and giving information. So when someone asks you a question, you answer with, they're asking you a question just to make conversation. You had a question, actually. Raise your hand. Okay.
Okay, so I go to social settings to make a contact. How do I steer the conversation to the topics that I need?
What topics do you want?
Well, just talk about business.
In a social gathering, we don't talk about business. We use that social gathering to build a network, to then say, let's go to lunch sometime. You were really interesting. Why don't we set up a lunch sometime? And so that's when we get to know more about you. I was at a wedding one time and someone was passing out, she was in finance, and she was passing out a business card at the wedding. And I thought, interesting, but no, well.
On the golf course, we do a lot of business.
That's something else. Yes. Golf course is meant for business. Yes, golf course is totally about business.
But if there's a barbecue, some other.
Right, that's right. But if it's not, but that's during your workday probably, the golf course. Yeah. Right. Sometimes not. I mean, sometimes, you know what, in any situation, sort of, here's the set of protocol, and then we look at it and we evaluate it in the situation. And, you know, then okay, so then she wants to talk about business a little bit. Then, okay, you know, but maybe you even, you know, have a little bit of time doing it. Most of the time we want to just talk social topics anyway, so that business lunch, don't just jump right into business. Have the first 15, 20 minutes that you're talking about social topics, then you can get to business afterwards.
Well, the thing that was on my mind was about the thing that you were saying before this, that for example, you don't say where you study. So for example, in Baltimore, you don't want to show off.
In a social gathering.
Yeah. Sometimes people ask you, okay, which university?
Then you're fine.
And it gets really bad, actually. Then you say Hopkins, and you're one of the smart guys. And they don't stop. Then you just, what should I do now? You just want to run away.
Right, I know. Oh, you must be one of those. That's just goes with it. You must be one of those really smart people. How would you like to do what I do? So how would you like to do what I do? So I teach table manners. How would you like to go out to dinner with me? You know? So I try to say I do anything else. I work on, I don't know if it's something else, international something. Or when I was public speaking and a speech and debate coach. Speech and debate. I didn't even realize that would be such a problem. So, you know, what's your area in field of communication theory and research? So what? Something public speaking. I don't want to say anything anymore. Or you ever write a letter and you find out that someone who's been a journalist and really cares about punctuation is a real stickler for punctuation, and you're looking at this and you're so afraid to send that email. That happened to me recently. So yes, so we don't want to be intimidating, but then many, the other part of that, though, is that when you say that, because maybe someone wants to know because she also went to Hopkins. And then that is then a building our network, which is what we want to do. So a question that was asked, the purpose of this network, or when you're having a hard time, or you're out of work, that's when you do reach out for your network. Your network's everybody. Who is your network? When you think, who is your network? Tell me, just everyone tell me who your network is. It is
People you know.
all the people you know. So it's students, it's professors, it's coworkers, it's your family, it's alumni. Anyone who has an affiliation with Hopkins, reach out, and certainly those alumni gatherings are really, those events are really important for jobs. Who else is your, go ahead.
I have a comment. I think it's more about people know you rather than people you know.
Right, well sure, absolutely, right, it's all of it, it's all of that too, and then they know you, and then they make a reference to you. My daughter, who had gotten a job out of school, she went to school in Chicago, and so she got a job right out of school in Madison, Wisconsin, and then she got sick, needed to come back to Baltimore, and she was trying to get jobs, just sending out, filling out applications. You know how those applications are, where they give you IQ tests as part. You know how they are, right? Where they're actually giving you an IQ test. And then finally, I talked to the company across the hall from me, and that's how she got the job. It's who you know. I mean, it's very much who you know. So who else is your? So it's your mother's friends too, or your network as well. Who else? It's any social group you have. That's your network. And the other thing about it is to say when you are at the networking events, at a mingling event, or whatever it is, what are the words you should say as you are looking for a job? What are the words that should come out of your mouth? I'm looking for a job. I'm in the market for a job. Why do you say that? Why do you say I'm in the market for a job?
Because they might know someone who's looking.
Yeah, because they, right there, someone tells me, if someone tells me he's in the market or she's in the market for a job, I reach out then to my network, just like that, and my network is vast.
I'm in the market for a job.
Okay. I just got somebody a job. I just got a person a job 2 days ago. And it was this kind of thing where it was, here was me, here was this person, here was this person, and you get, it was even here, an old-fashioned resume. This one said, I just get me the button with all the CV and hand deliver it to that person. That's.
But I've read books that says that if you first meet someone and you say that, it sounds like.
Well, you don't have to say it right away. You don't have to say it.
Yeah, I remember that if you're networking and you tell people like I'm interested in finding a job, they feel like you're playing them, like you're asked they're trying to establish a relationship, and you're just all they hear is this person wants me to get this job.
Yeah, it's not like this. I mean, it's not like that, but it's kind of like that. Or it's okay. It's really okay. It's really okay. And I know it's sort of a funny position to be in, where you don't want to say I seem desperate. Do I seem desperate? And if the reality is that, I am. I'm in the market for a job. And so how else are they going to possibly know? And your best connections are going to be, again, your network, your great connections are going to be your Hopkins connections, too, for professional opportunities. Someone says, oh, well, here's a person from Hopkins. I mean, right there, you've gone through lots of checks at that point. And then someone has said, I went to this school where I went, I have these relationships. You have to do it. Okay, so we know how to have conversation. That's what you're in the conversation, but what we haven't talked about is how to get into the conversation, how to actually get in. So there are a number of ways to get in. So you've got a networking event, you've got a mingling event. You're going to set a goal, and the goal is that you're going to meet 10 new people. Make that, so write that down and underline it. I'm going to meet 10 new people. And that doesn't mean this group of 5 is 5. That means that's 1. So, as I mentioned before, in the course of those 2 hours, you're going to work the room telling yourself, all right, I'm at number 3 group right now. I've got 7 more to go. And that now makes it your event. It's your event now. My event is that I'm going somewhere and I'm going to meet 10 new people. And again, it will take about 2 hours. Or, you know, and if you do more than that, that's okay as well. And how do you get in? How do you get in? There are some of you who are really good at this. So how do you get in?
Into what?
Into that group. How do you get in? How?
I kind of just get walk in.
Walk right in and stand and.
Right. Put your hand out just like that, and you say, "Hello, I'm Kathy Hansen." Just like that. I mean, you actually put your hand in. Another way in is to kind of stand at the edge, fade in, listen to what they're saying. Oh, that's really interesting. Another way in is, this seemed like a really fun group over here. Yeah, mind if I join you? Have an opening line before the event. So you've thought about what you're going to talk about. You've done Google topics, or you've been a generalist so that you're armed with topics. You've researched the event, whatever it might be. You've reviewed the guest lists as well. And now you also want to say, how do I present myself? How do I want to present myself? So just have that in mind beforehand. It may not be what you use, but at least have that in mind. For the wedding, you might say how you're connected with the bride or the groom, what brings you there. All right. So I'm going to have you 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just stand here and be together as if you're at an event. You're just going to talk. This is easy. Well, we can do 5. That's fine. Okay, that's fine. Okay, but we're not even finished. Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
yes. Okay, now look at each other and just be talking. We don't even have to hear what you're saying, just actually be talking. Who finds this difficult to get into an event like this, who would like to practice with me helping you?
All the social people.
I know, we're all the social people. Those are people who don't have trouble. Yes. You might, but that might be, this seems like such an interesting group. I mean, that kind of an appropriate compliment too. You are so good looking. That's a really good question. So the question of, can we compliment someone's appearances? In the business world, same-sex appearances, you could, but sometimes people in a business setting might find it inappropriate. So I'd be careful. It's one of those kind of watch it. All right, you hate this. Come on. Right over here. We'll be talking.
Oh, we're still going. Of course. I didn't know.
Just get it there. Okay, look at that. What technique did he use? He faded in. Okay. Sit down. Very good. You stay up. All right. Okay. I want you to use a different approach. Okay. And I want you to be talking. Okay.
Yeah. So we're looking at fine.
Hi, I'm Kay.
Okay, all right. So she wanted to fade in, but she knew that she needed to do something else. So she just looked, just like that's what you do. You just put your hand out. What are they going to do? Right, hi, Kathy. It's very nice to meet you as well. I'm from the International School of Protocol.
I'm Shrita Rao, master's in Biotech.
Okay, it's a pleasure to, and help me with your name again. Shrita, very, very, very nice to meet you. Please call me Kathy. Okay, something like that, okay?
And you want to keep...
Well, just in that first part, yeah, that's a really good question. Just in that first part, because otherwise it would have been, I am Kathy. Okay, this is still part of that introduction. I'm just clarifying the name, etc. at this point right here. So we're still just meeting each other, and then we know to stop at that point.
Actually, I had a question too
Yes.
on that topic. In terms of how to ask for somebody to repeat their name, if you're still not getting it, this is hard for me. I'm a bit hard of hearing, and so especially in loud settings like restaurants and things like that, even if it's not a difficult to pronounce name, sometimes it's tricky. If you have to ask a third or fourth time, is that okay? Like,
That's a great issue.
When do you let it go?
Sort of that when to let it go. And when it becomes insulting to a person, then you would let it go, too. I mean, when anything becomes insulting. So if you know, I don't hear the name, I don't understand the name, and this is going to become ridiculous here, and it's going to get away from the whole thing, and I don't want you to have to write it down. So we're assessing a situation, and so I can give you an example with an introduction where a colleague of mine and I were at a wedding together, and I was not used to seeing him outside of that context, and we taught in rooms next to each other for 8 number of years. And so I was then introducing him to my date, introducing them to each other, and I couldn't remember this colleague's name. I didn't remember my date's name. But you have that happen, I mean, just situationally. And it would have been terribly insulting to say, I'm sorry, can you remind me of your name? That would have been just wrong to do. And so what I did is I performed the whole introduction saying this is a colleague of mine who I've known, and we go back this long, all of that. And then I said the name of the person that I was with, and I was hoping that the person would have picked up on the fact that I didn't say the name, and the person would have kindly said, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, right? That's really nice for someone to do for you. But he didn't. And so I said something to him. I said, I really needed you to say, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name. He said, I thought you said the name. So again, what would have been the most insulting thing, the more insulting thing would have been not. The more insulting thing could be situation. To keep saying, I'm sorry, I can't hear, could you say your name again? Again, we look at that. We always think what's best for the circumstances.
Can you ask them to spell it?
I do that sometimes. I sometimes will do that. But I won't do it like at the 4th time. I will just do it, maybe right away. I'm sorry, could you say your name again? Could you spell that for me? And I won't push it for too long, too. Because again, then it becomes more about how do you spell your name than what I really want to do is have this opportunity to make some conversation. Go ahead and sit down.
So
Thank you.
Customary to exchange business card at the beginning?
No. You wait for a while. Generally, and most people don't know this, you wait for a senior person to offer her business card or his business card first. A lot of people don't know that, so that might not happen.
How about asking for business cards? Is that also the profile of folks?
What I really say, you can't answer it, that's what I'm thinking. We generally wouldn't ask a senior person, but again, most people don't know that. And so keep in mind that we don't really need business cards anymore. That everything we need, we can find out very easily. That we can, but you could say, do you happen to have a business card? I'd love to, something like that. Or just keep in mind who the person is. Go look it up, find the person that way, send an email. And again, we'll be talking about that after that follow-up too.
When you're trying to break into the group, you only introduce yourself to one person and not the group?
It just depends. It just depends. They might all want to go like this and say, or it just might be one person. So let's talk then about, we talked about getting in, then you're making conversation. Sometimes the group will break off. But we need to talk about as well getting out of the conversation. Who in here has trouble getting out? So, come on. So the way you get out is you can say, so nice to have met you, I look forward to it. I'm going to send you that link that I was mentioning, that article, okay? And then do that. That's that after event follow-up, where you want to make sure that you are following up. Every connection, those 10 people, maybe follow up with at least 3 of them, possibly all 10. Do follow up in some way or another. I mean, just to say, it was so nice to have met you. You can even do a handwritten note. Remember those? What you want to have for a handwritten note is a correspondence card. A correspondence card. A correspondence card is, it's in between a 4x6 and a 5x7. It's somewhere in there. It's about a 4x6, but it has a particular dimension to it. Look up correspondence cards. They're not a foldover. Sometimes they're called informal. Correspondence card is all-purpose stationery, and it has your name on it, on the top, or it can have your monogram on it. And that's what you use to write your thank you notes for interviews. And yes, for interviews, do write a thank you note. A handwritten thank you note, I hear a whole lot about that, too, from the people on the hiring end.
To send a thank you note afterwards.
So you send a thank you
For example,
note afterwards, so
like the
after
day
an interview. All the occasions to send a thank you note are after an interview, after someone has made a referral, after someone's written you a letter of recommendation or endorsed you in some way. These are businesses, write that thank you note. When else? After you've been to someone's house for dinner, after someone's done something nice for you, after someone's given you a gift, after someone has written you a letter of condolence.
What about sending an email?
That's something.
So business cards, no, but thank you cards, yes.
Business cards are nice. They're nice, and they're not as necessary. The business card was so I can find you, and now I can find you otherwise.
Okay.
That's what the business card does. But a thank you note, the business card allowed me to write a thank you note, but now I can do it otherwise.
I actually have questions about following up after an interview, and the people, they take a while before they contact you again. So what I've been doing, I've had several interviews, and I'm collecting reading material relevant to what their research is in. So this one particular group, it took like a month before they contacted me for the actual interview after the phone interview. So I did get
It's maddening, by the way, too.
It's what?
This is maddening.
Yeah.
It's maddening.
It can be, yes. And so just to show that I was still interested, I did follow up on reading material that I found on my own. I sent them an article that I thought was very relevant to what they showed me, and I asked a lot of questions. So I don't expect to hear from them, but is that a good practice?
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. And I know the question, does that make me look desperate? It doesn't. It doesn't. It really doesn't. It's saying I'm interested and I'm paying attention. I paid attention, and that's what everybody wants. I paid attention. So, back to getting out. Getting out. Oh, you can fade away. You can say, as I mentioned before, nice to meet you. And then there's the old switch. So someone comes in, you leave. Or have you ever had that opportunity where somebody is really difficult that you're stuck in a conversation with? We've had that, right? Experience of it's happened. And so this is the mean thing that you do. You can't leave the person. So you say, Shabazz?
Yes.
You say, Shabazz, I'd love you to meet my friend Fozia. I'd love you to meet Fozia Shabazz. And later you say to me, you owe me one.
Can you
So
use it?
that's a way out. So another way out is refresh to, So we've talked a bit about that after event follow-up, and that's important. And we're going to do a conversation in a moment. But that after event follow-up is so important too. I mean, to really do that, that's putting you in contact, not, when you follow up with one person, it's not one person. I mean, we know that. We know how you can look, you can see LinkedIn, you can see that. How are your Facebook pages, by the way? Good. Use them like a resume. I mean, but only a resume that shows that you're very interesting. It has you doing this or that, something interesting. How are your LinkedIn profiles? Right. All right. So you just do use it. It just you are going to be searched, and so when you come up that way, again, you can use that. You can attach things to that as well. So make sure your LinkedIn, your Facebook are it's this visual then opportunity. And no one's experienced. I know some people I work with are doing this, where you're also having to have kind of a YouTube presentation as part of your resume. No one's having to do that. Are you? I didn't think in your industry, but in some of the industries, people are needing to do that then as well for the resumes also. Yes.
It's coming along.
Okay.
I know a few people in this
who are having that.
started to do that. Yeah, they're keeners.
All right. So what I want you to do now is I want you just to gather with the people around you, and I want you to move in and out of conversation appropriately. Normally you'll stay about 10 minutes. Today we won't. I just want you to be able to leave the conversation and to join another group. So just stand up, gather in, say groups of 4 in different parts of the room. And then I want you to, without me telling you, can you do it without me telling you? Easy. And you'll do it in the next real situation, too. So that you'll go place to place. I want to entertain questions and also answer some questions that were asked as people were coming up to me. One was if someone asks you an awkward, inappropriate question, or makes a strange joke. It's just wrong. What do you do? And sometimes you can, it depends on the person, you just walk away. Nicely too. Nice to meet you. Okay, that person over there. But other times you're going to fully engage in conversation. Someone has asked you something, as was mentioned, how much money do you make? And that's a really strange question. And so what would you do? I can tell you what.
I would say I make exactly I make enough.
You don't need to answer it. You pretend that the question, if it's a very strange question, pretend that there's no way that that question was actually asked. and so you would just bring up another topic. Just if someone says something that's just the wrong question, just act as if they didn't ask the question. And then maybe bring someone else in, talk about something else. So that's really how we just get, if someone does something, it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
I had something really funny where I did ignore them and they did ask again.
Yes. And so that's where you bring someone else in. And that's the day I'd love you to come meet my friend. We'll catch up later. Sorry, I owe you a drink, Dave.
Hopefully you don't get it.
I don't know, even worse. I know, sometimes it's not, right, exactly. So the other question is how to not end up, and what you don't want to do is to end up with someone all right. And I think that's probably a tendency that sometimes happens because, one, the person's really interesting. Two, you're just ended up strangely stuck with the person. And that's for another time. To have that prolonged conversation is not at the networking event. The other questions I was getting was about interviewing questions. And Anne will talk about interviewing questions. We talking with Ann, we felt like if I addressed interviewing questions, that would water down the intent of the mingling and networking. But this is the getting ready for the interview questions. Are you all looking at Glassdoor for interview questions? So Glassdoor is where you'll get the interview questions for the job, and people post the questions there. So they say, I had an interview with whatever it was, company, and here are the questions, and here's what I wore, and this is how I walked around the campus, and so you'll get the actual questions that way too. So use the internet to get your questions. That is very helpful, and then we'll talk about other strategies for interview questions, hopefully in another session. Are there other questions?
I know this is sometimes with awkward situations, but can you talk about appropriate distance and,
yes,
and where your hand should be?
That's going to vary from culture to culture. So, and it's also going to vary from setting to setting. So, a researcher in Northam looked at people and social interactions, and he found what the appropriate distances were. Public distance is 12 feet and more, and this is Western culture. So he looked at people in North America. Actually, he broadened it to people in some other places too. But 12 feet and over is going to be, again, public distance. Your 4 to 12 feet is going to be a social distance. And it's not a crowded room. That's going to be the distance that you want to keep. And again, because it varies from culture to culture, you will find that there are some people who violate that expectation, that they're going to stand closer. 1.5 to 4 feet is personal distance. If you have a crowded room, you're going to need to be in that personal distance. When you get closer than 18 inches or 1.5 feet, that's too close. That's too close. So 0 to 18 inches is intimate distance, and that's going to be reserved for people that you're very close to. So you're going to be safe in a social situation, in a job interview, at about that, at a handshaking distance is going to be about right. A crowded room is going to necessitate that you get closer, just because you're not going to hear the person. And generally what you do is you turn to the side, so you're not face to face, it's going to be too close. So that's the research on distance, and that's what you're going to find for the most part. And again, if you're stepping closer than that, you're violating Western culture, North American expectation. When you're moving in closer than that 3 or 4 feet, it's going to make people in Western culture uncomfortable. If you, other cultures who stand closer, they're going to find people from Western culture to be very aloof, that aren't standing closer. And distance is something, again, that's very cultural. Other questions?
Yeah, I found it a little awkward situation. We have four persons, and the people at the left side and the right side speak together, and I have to speak to the person directly. Like,
what you might want to do is step around them.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and step around like that, and just physically, here, we'll do it right up here. So all 4 of us.
That would be
and so you 2 are talking, just talk. And then we start talking, and then we just go like this. Just like that. So otherwise it becomes impossible to hear. You don't want to talk for too long. In general, you don't want to talk for too long. If you want to go back and forth, generally not more than a minute.
I was recently in a situation, at Hopkins we have professors that dedicate their lives here, and they grow old and pass away. So recently there was we had like a memorial service for someone who was very influential in science and studies now. And a lot of my coworkers who have been here 20 years knew him, but I didn't know him. But I went to the memorial service because I knew he was so influential. I wanted to learn more about him. I never met him. But then after the service, there was a lunch and people were talking, and I just felt so awkward because I didn't know him, and everybody knew I So then if the topic comes up like, well, why are you here?
Just what you said, just
Yeah.
what you said. He was so interesting, I wanted to learn more about him, and I wanted to show my respects. And that's why we go to memorial service, to show our respect. We don't need to know the person, unless it's a closed service, and then you don't. But if it's an open service, then it's appropriate to know. That's a great question.
Is this a good time to?
This is a fine time.
It's a good time?
And you may email me, you have my information, so feel free if you have any questions, people do send me questions.
All right. Well, everyone, before everyone heads out, my name is David Odgers. I'm the executive director. I'd like to first thank everybody for coming out tonight. I know it's very late, and it's school night. I'm sure everyone has lots of homework to do. If you didn't catch, this is Anne.
I'm our assistant executive director.
And she also coordinated basically this entire event by herself, so she did an incredible job.
She did.
And anybody else from the group that wants to stand up? We have Kamal here.
Hey guys, I'm Komal. I'm also part of the HPN, and to make my name easier, as I told you guys before, you guys can call me Komal.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashwita. I call myself Ash because it's a lot easier, and I am the Assistant Director for Industrial Relations, so that's me.
And then we have Dustin back here who's been diligently filming.
I'm the Director of Social Media and Communications.
And then we have Dave.
Okay, I'm new. I'm Dave. I'm a grad student and I'm sort of trying to spread the HBA influence to the Hopkins Medical Campus. So if anybody's interested, you can talk to me. Talk to Dave.
Hi, I'm Namita and I'm a grad student too, Masters in Biotechnology, and I'm with the Communications Committee of HBN.
Hi, I'm Geoffrey. I'm currently working as a fundraiser and I want to increase the awareness of HBN. Nice to meet you.
Thank you guys. We also had our partners. Patrick, you want to? Yeah, I'm Patrick Boyle. I'm with the Homewood Postdoc Association. This is Ying Wang. She's also with the Postdoc Association. If you're a postdoc, put your hand up. Okay. Pretty great. Thank you very much. Very welcome. We also have the Healthcare Business Association was another co-sponsor of ours. I think most of them have filtered out. Anybody else, HBA around here? Yeah, kind of one there.
I'm the only one? Yeah, I'm from HBN. It's a student organization in California School, and it's actually the second year since we established. It's kind of new, and we established the strategic partnership with HBN, and we have a lot of interesting events. For example, this Friday we have a healthcare and consulting forum at the Kennedy School. So if you're interested, you can go to the Harbor East and enjoy the nice view near the sea. Hopefully sometime you can join it. And also many wonderful food at Harbor East. Is it free? Yeah, we can talk about discount.
I'm just kidding. All right, and I wanted to ask everyone what you guys thought. Please feel free to